The Pouillon family are privy to some fantastic terroir in Champagne's Grande Vallée. Rich and textured while paradoxically elegant and enthrallingly vibrant, R.Pouillon champagnes are stunning interpretations of terroir, especially through the eyes of pinot noir and elaborated with a sensitive hand. Today we are going to meet the man behind their making. Fabrice Pouillon makes exceptional champagnes. He seems to possess a superpower, managing to achieve a necessary balance between power and delicacy, which sometimes eludes others with a heavy hand, and especially those who rely on barrels for vinification. It was my pleasure to interview Fabrice recently in Champagne. So Fabrice, welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you for your coming.
So Fabrice, your family's domain rests in the picturesque village of Meuril-sur-Ailly going back to 1947. This is Pinot Noir territory, of course, some of the very best. Hinged to the banks of the Marne River facing south, nestled between the Grand Cru villages of Ailly and Tours-sur-Marne, its status is premier cru and perhaps unfairly so, but with a 99% ranking, it sits at the very top of the former Échelle de Cru scale. The Pinot here isn't dissimilar to its more celebrated neighbour of Ailly, elegant yet powerful with velvety tannins. Clos de Gouas, Philippina's lauded prestige cuvée, shares the same terroir as your Le Montgrégé, sitting just below it on the chalky slopes of the Montgrégé hill. So can you describe the terroir that you predominantly are planted to?
So our domain is mainly located in the Grande Vallée. So the typical terroir of Grande Vallée is part of clay on the top of the soil and the chalk, very intense chalk. And specifically in Ailly, in Meuril-sur-Ailly, as you said, the expression of soil is a little bit different than Ailly for different reasons. Probably the period of the Campagna in Ailly and Meuril is a little bit different, and the exposition in Meuril-sur-Ailly is more on the east part, so it keeps more freshness, more elegance than the terroir of Ailly, which is regularly as more powerful or probably more rustic.
And so what is that ultimately bringing to your wines? How is it, do you think that it's bringing more elegance to your wines? Is that something that, you know, you aspire more to? Because your wines, and we'll get more into the stylistic aspirations, but I find that your wines have a beautiful balance between a lot of concentration, a lot of power, but there's also this underlying current of elegance that always comes through.
I think it's many, many details during the process in the vineyard and in the vinification, which give the style of our wines. And I try to give the real expression of each different soil. So I don't want to make Ailly more elegant. Ailly is more powerful. So I keep Ailly like this style. And for example, the vineyard we have in the Montagne de Reims, les Terres Froides in Toxières, which is very cold area on the north. I keep this in my vision of the viticulture and the vinification.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a good segue into talking about the other terroir that belongs to your domain. So obviously the character of your wines comes from both sides of the Marne Valley, principally Meuril-sur-Ailly, as we just discussed, and Ailly, but also Avenay-Val d'Or, Epernay, Vestini, Mutiny, Toursières, as you mentioned. So there's quite a beautiful compilation of different, I guess, microclimates that you can obviously play with, some warmer, some cooler. There's just, I think, 7 hectares of land that belong to your domain, dispersed across around 40 parcels, mostly planted to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, just a little bit of Meunier. But you have nothing in the Côte de Blanc. And that's really interesting because I think a lot of growers do aim to have something coming from the Côte de Blanc. So can you describe why that is? What is the decision around only planting Chardonnay in these areas outside of the Côte de Blanc?
Just because it's the actual composition of the domain is really become from the history of the domain. My grandfather began to make wine just after the Second War, and it just began with one vineyard in Meuril-sur-Ailly, Les Blanchiens, half an hectare. And it's really my grandfather, my father and me who built the domain. And we had in the past vineyard in the Côte des Blancs because my mother is coming from Le Mesnil-sur-Roger. Yeah. So I cultivate and my father cultivate in the 80s and 90s. And I just arrived in the domain. I cultivate 2 hectares in Le Mesnil-sur-Roger. But the history of the family, now it's another part of the family who cultivate the vineyard in Le Mesnil-sur-Roger. So I know the quality of the Chardonnay in the Côte des Blancs, but I make my experience in the Vallée de la Marne. And for me, it's very difficult to really understand the terroir and how you must find a good combination between the the soil and the vines. So I make a focus on the Vallée de la Marne. And I think I am one of the specialists of the Pinot Noir in Vallée de la Marne. And probably I think I'm not a specialist of the Chardonnay in the Côte des Blancs. So that's why I let the Chardonnay in the Côte des Blancs for other good growers.
Yeah.
And I make a focus on the Pinot Noir in Vallée de la Marne.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. But I find too the expression of Chardonnay coming from the territory that you own primarily is very different sort of Chardonnay. It's very interesting to drink. It's typically more vinous as well. You make a beautiful expression from Le Valnon, which is one of my absolute favorite expressions from IE, Chardonnay grown in basically Pinot Noir territory. So can you talk us through maybe that expression of the Chardonnay and how you manage to keep it still very palatable, still very drinkable, not too heavy, because it is a different aspect of Chardonnay that a lot of people probably aren't so used to?
So two things about the grape varieties. For me, the grape varieties is only the instrument to give the right expression of soil. I don't really want to give a wine with the taste of Chardonnay or the wine with the taste of Pinot Noir. So as you said in Les Valnons, it's a really interesting expression of Chardonnay just because the terroir of Haï go more on the focus than the Chardonnay really as a grape. Yes. So I think and this part of the village of Haï, we make some analysis with a geolog in Haï of the terroir Les Valnons. And we found that there is a little part of clay in Les Valnons, but which is more adapted to the white grape. That's why probably
grows so well.
Yes, the grower planted some Chardonnay in this area, and the result probably is better with Chardonnay than Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
And yes, about the result of the wine, I think it just because I really make more focus on the maturity and the quantity of minerals we have in the wine, which always keep freshness and good balance in the wine, for example, in Les Valnons.
So do you have to treat the Chardonnay differently in so far as your vineyard management there in IE than you do, say, for example, in the Côte de Blanc? Are you still using a Chablis method, for example, with the pruning?
We with the old Chardonnay we have, which were planted before the last 10 years, I use Chardonnay because they were planted I use the Chablis, because they were planted for this system. But since 10 years, we changed a little bit the system of pruning. We use now the Guyot system because it limits the quantity of grape, and it's the same system that it renew regularly. But for me, you can more control with the Guyot system than the Chablis.
About the yield.
Yes. So we are actually we continue to experiment the different system. We will probably in Les Valnons we replant a part of the vineyard last year, and we will continue to experiment a little bit change in the Chablis system. Chablis could be a good system, but we need to change a little bit the height. The height of the vines, and probably change a little bit the quantity of charpente. So yes, we continue to experiment because Chardonnay must be controlled for the yield.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. One of the things that I remember about what you said to me a few years ago is that how with Le Valnon, you like to serve it blind because it often tricks people to think that it is more Pinot than Chardonnay.
Yes.
I love that because, as you say, it really does reflect more the terroir than it does the varietal. And it's so true because there's a beautiful structural element and also concentration to the wine that comes out. And I love that you can trick very sophisticated people who know champagne so well into thinking that it's something that it's not.
I always make the comparison between Les Valnons and Le Montgruguet. Montgruguet, if you make if you make a blind test, some people could think it's a Pinot Noir, and I said it's more the taste of Haï.
Yeah.
And same thing in Le Montgruguet, we have only Pinot Noir in Montgruguet. But if you make a blind test of Le Montgruguet, some vintage you could find it's a Chardonnay because it's really the expression of the minerality from the chalk in Le Montgruguet.
The freshness.
Yeah, the freshness of the chalk there. And probably could think it could be a Chardonnay.
Yeah, really interesting.
And that's why I said the focus is the soil, and it's important to find the good vines adapted to this soil.
Yeah. So we touched on it before, but, I've always been a big fan of yours. You do make exceptional champagnes. They're rich and textured, multi-layered, sparkling with energy. There's always so much energy, which I find very exciting to drink. But however, they always remain elegant, and that's what we spoke about before. So you said that there are just so many variables. It's obviously not just terroir, although the terroir plays a big part in its, I guess, the formative side of the champagnes. What other contributing elements are going into your winemaking decisions to bring that necessary balance between power and delicacy, especially when there are other producers out there that tend to go too far down the powerful side?
I think that's, for me, if we harvest the grape with a higher level of maturity, we don't lose something. Some growers think that's too much maturity. You have less acidity and less balance in the wine. But I think that if you make the right practice in the vineyard, you keep everything in the grape, and you can wait to harvest later to increase the quantity of minerals in the grape. And if you have more minerals, you keep the balance. I think many people make a confusion between minerality and acidity. Minerality is the quantity of minerals you have into the wine, and the minerals give the structure to the wine. And the acidity is only a taste you have in your mouth. Your wine is acid or not acid, but it's not a guarantee that you keep freshness if you have more acidity.
Yeah. Yeah, so you touched on maturation, and
Yes.
I know that the pushing maturation has been a big focus of your pursuit as a winemaker, specifically getting the right phenolic structure and taste into your wines. Your wines are always delicious, you want another glass because there's a deliciousness to them. So it sort of takes over from this, I guess, more conventional way of thinking that, we monitor sugar and acidity, as you just said, to produce the best harvest. So what inspired you specifically to follow a phenolic and taste pathway as opposed to the traditional pathway of sugar and acidity?
I think when we want to make this vision of the wine, we need to have some specific practice into the soil. Just to understand, the balance become from the minerals which are in the grape become from the soil. So to take the maximum of information from the soil, you are to have a soil which have good life. What is good life into the soil? So no chemical product and not too much flowering. You need to have many vegetal on the soil.
Yeah.
The vines is a part of the vegetal, but you need to have many vegetal on the soil. So we make regenerative practice. We let natural grass growing. So I try to have a natural ecosystem in our vineyard, which is good balance between the different vegetal. And we don't forget that the vines must be the most important vegetal of the system. So that's why we make a regenerative practice. So with this system, we have good life into the soil. Second part is I need to have vineyard vines which have good power and good growing. If you have vineyard which has good growing, you have many roots in the soil. So if you have many roots, you can take a lot of minerals which are available into the soil. And the last step for me is the yield. If you control the yield, so it's my job to control the quantity of grape for each vines, we can concentrate all the minerals we have in the soil, taking by the roots going into the grape. And the last step, if we increase the time of maturity, we increase the quantity of minerals because we have more time for the minerals to come in from the roots into the grape. So these total details give at the end, for me, wine and juice, which have the maximum of information from the soil.
Yeah.
And this is for me the best way to have the right expression and the good balance wine from the origin.
Yeah. So really trying to push that period of time, that long, slow concentration period that is necessary to achieve that phenolic ripeness that you're ultimately wanting, which is becoming increasingly more difficult, especially over the last few years to achieve these things. So how do you manage that? Because there's been, climate change is real. It's definitely, I guess, challenging a lot of producers now to adapt their practices. You're one of the leaders in those practices because you've been, employing organics and regenerative farming for a long time now. So you're probably ahead of the pack in that regard. But what particular challenges do you see in trying to maximize that sort of growing period in order to get the maturation, also achieve the freshness at the same time?
I think now the most important things we have to do is to understand and make a focus on the grape varieties. we need to find the right Pinot Noir and the right Chardonnay, which is adapted for the future, for the climate change, and for our vision of practice. That's why me and other growers, we are working to make research on our old Sélection Massale and to understand in this Sélection Massale, we have many different type of vines, many different individual, and you have some Pinot Noir with a very low maturity. You have Pinot Noir which have a short maturity. We have Pinot Noir with big grape, small grape. So many, many different type of Pinot Noir. And I think we can more continues to adapt to the climate change with a good research on our actual grape varieties. Before searching new grape varieties, I think we can make a really good research on the classic Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and probably the old ones.
Yeah. So one of the unique Pouillon practices is to press 4 to 5 times to release juice in what you call fractions. And you've explained to me that you feel that that respects the anatomy of the berry. You tell it in a really interesting way that I think it makes it very common sense. You know, it just respects, you know, the juice that is coming out at different fractions in that pressing process. It is different to the traditional method of separating the cuvee from the tie, for example, which is, you know, pretty, I guess, basic approach to pressing the juice. So can you talk us through your ideas around that? And can you explain with each of the 30-minute presses that you tend to go through, the extraction targets, different parts of the berry? So what is your thinking around all of that and what are you trying to achieve?
Everybody in Champagne know that for a cuvee, sometimes you need to press the grape 2 times, sometimes 3 times, and it could be different for each press. And it's just because the anatomy of each grape is different. It depends on the grape varieties and the maturity and the type of soil. And it's an old consultant in vinification, which is a friend of me, which make many vinification in other countries. And he explained to me that it's only in Champagne that you control the quantity of grape and you control the quantity of juice, and you have rules between each.
Yes.
But it just to guarantee to the negotiant that they buy the same quantity of juice to the same quantity of grape. And just to explain, the cuvée is 2,050 liters.
Yes.
It's 10 barrels of champagne. So that's why this number is calculated. But if you press the grape for same time and same pressure, and you compare 2 types of grape, you could have very different level of juice. And just because the size of the berry is different and the composition of the berry is different. And this old consultant explained to me when he vinificates in many different countries where people don't know the quantity of grape and they don't know the quantity of juice, the best way to press the grape with a very high level of quality is the time of the pressure. Because with this system, you are more adapted to anatomy of the berry. And we begin to work with this system. And I really understand that the cuvée must be split in 3 parts because in the cuvée, you have different origin of juice from the berry. And we make control with the School of Œnology in Reims of each different press. And we understand that the phenolic composition, acidity composition, sugar composition is totally different from each one. And the blend of the 3 ones in the cuvée give a good expression. The cuvée is always good expression. But if you split, you can adapt the way of vinification from each one. And for me, you can adapt the oxidation of each one.
Yeah. Okay. So what part of the press is more oxidative?
So the last part is more oxidative in the same press. And after you could have a different level of oxidation depending on the origin of the grape, so the soil. For me, if you have more clay, you must, and you have more oxidable molecule into the juice. And if you have more chalk, you can reduce the level of oxidation because you have more minerals, and the more minerals are more on the front of the expression of the juice and the wine.
It's very interesting. But it must make it very difficult as a winemaker to keep, I guess, track of everything that's coming in to your pressoir and to be really on top of that, the logistics really of managing all of that and knowing how to make those decisions in the moment, how to vinify each of those parcels. So it must be challenging, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but you must be used to it as well.
There is a part of experience and there is a part of experimentation every year.
Yeah. there's wins and losses, of course. I also remember that you had said to me that under this system, you achieve a different kind of volume depending on grape variety and origin of soil. Very interestingly, you say that grapes planted on chalk results in less juice and vinification is adapted accordingly. So can you explain why this is and how do you adapt the vinification?
So it's exactly what I explained before. You have wine, so juice from different origin, grape and soil. We separate from the different part of the berry, and we have to vinificate them. So why we use different size and different type of barrels is really to adapt the oxidation of each one. So if it's a young, small barrel, the oxidation is more than it's an old and big barrel. So we adapt the size and the age of the barrels to adapt the oxidation. And the second step is the time we let the wine into the barrel, which is adapt the level of oxidation during the time.
So why is it that, grapes planted on chalky soils are producing less volume than grapes planted elsewhere?
It don't really produce less volume. It's just because the volume is more balanced between the first, the second, and the third part of the press. The total volume is the same.
It's the same.
But the repartition is a little bit different inside the berry.
Okay. So one of the interesting facets about what you do is bottle aging as well. So you believe that you need balance between barrel and bottle. We've got a really interesting philosophy around this. So you say that wine from barrel gives texture and that it needs more time in the bottle because it allows the terroir to come back out in front. So I've never heard anyone say that sort of thing before. What makes you say this?
We make sparkling wine. So our job is not only to make wine and put in bottles. We have a second system in Champagne. We put bubbles into the wine when we make the bottling. And for me, fermentation, and it's not only for wine, fermentation for everything is the life of the product. And prise de mousse, the méthode champenoise, is really the second life of our wines. And when we make a big focus on the first fermentation, the aging of the wine in the barrels, we put again the wine for a second part of the aging, so the second fermentation. And I think we need again to adapt the system with a good balance between oxidation and reduction during the aging in the bottles. And for wines which have many things to speak to expression, we need time in the bottles to give to them the time to expression.
Yeah, because they're so closely related.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And they need to join together.
Yes, yeah. And that's really why we use cork bottling for the long aging in the bottles.
Yes.
Because the cork really help the wine to go from the oxidative system to the reductive system.
That's a very interesting philosophy. So 2025 marks 20 years of what you playfully call MFP, so Method Fabrice Pouillon, which I love. Can you explain what is MFP and how did you develop the concept and what makes it, the ultimate expression of the champagne that you're trying to produce?
So this concept began 20 years ago with one of our oldest vineyard, which was really adapted to the soil and to the climate at this time, because it always gives the right maturity with high level of sugar. And when I wanted to make a single vineyard cuvée from Chemin du Bois, I wanted to keep the freshness and not to increase the level of alcohol with the classic second fermentation.
Yeah.
So I imagine a system where we keep the level of alcohol at the level we have in the vineyard. So that's why I imagine a system where we can using for the second fermentation, the sugar from the grape, so the juice from the grape, to make it with the second fermentation. And for me, it's very natural concept because when you do that, you understand that you make a first fermentation with natural yeast and natural sugar from the grape. And again, we make a second fermentation with the same yeast and the same sugar. So there is a real link between the first fermentation and the second fermentation with this system. So since 19, we adapt this system for all the production of R.Pouillon because the principal effect of the climate change is the increasing level of sugar. So we can do that for all the process. And for me, as I said, the fermentation is really life into the wine. So if you make it with saccharose and selected yeast, the result is totally different if you use natural sugar from the grape and natural yeast.
So are there any additional challenges to following this process than just, I guess, taking cane sugar as most producers do?
I think when I imagine this system, I don't want to make a system adapted to the climate change. I wanted to make a system which is more natural and more adapted to my juice. But now I understand this method is really good things against the climate change because we can't fight always again the elevation of alcohol. The climate change, the principal effect is increasing the level of sugar into our grape.
Yeah.
And if we want to keep champagne as a nice level of alcohol, this system for me is very nice. And I have regularly call or visit from other growers in Champagne and other region, which really want to understand my concept because I think it's one of the part of the adaptation to the climate change.
Yeah. And it keeps it true to the terroir experience
Yes.
as well, which is really
Yes.
important for your DNA.
We do that now for all the process. And when I imagine before I put some sugar from can or everything into the wine, it's really
very different expression.
Yes.
So do you still experiment then with the cane sugar and also the method and just out of interest?
I did that a long time ago.
Okay.
But because many people ask to me, so we make specifically to show
interesting tasting.
Yeah.
Oh,
so next year we will have something to taste a big comparison between cane sugar and sugar from grape.
I love that idea. That's super interesting. Okay, so we're obviously here this week celebrating Le Printemps de Champagne, which is a fantastic celebration of growers who make exceptional champagnes. You are a member of the esteemed Terroir group, which comprises some of the very best growers in all of Champagne. So what is it like to be a member of the group, and how do you support each other, and what does the opportunity to be involved do for you?
So the Terroir group is really a picture of the real life in Champagne. So for me, there is other growers which has the same vision of us. So I make a focus on the regenerative practice and the method Fabrice Pouillon system of vinification. But I know other growers which are more specialized on other things. And it's really interesting to talk with them. And each one have his experimentation. Yeah. And we can partage the experimentation, exchange together regularly. There is, for 1 week of my job, I probably have a call of 2 or 3 growers, and I probably call over. Yeah, we regularly exchange a lot, and specifically in the group of Terroir. Mm-hmm. And yes, the beginning of Terroir was really group of friends, one grower who wanted to exchange a lot about our job and at the beginning to show the difference terroir to professional and show that Champagne is very friendly and people work a lot of together. Yeah. And for me, it's very interesting. And now there is a lot of new younger growers who introduce into the group, and it's the future generation of wine growing. And it's very nice to have this
the next
sparkling.
Generation. Yeah, yes. Exactly. They bring their own ideas, and it's a great collective effort to support each other, but also to promote the region and the amazing diversity that comes from Champagne. So lastly, I just wanted to conclude by asking you more of a personal question. You're surrounded, as you mentioned, by incredible wine growers. I'm sure that there are so many that you look up to. And I'm wondering, is there anyone in particular that you admire and why?
I have so many different. I could say, I explain that there is other growers for me who has more experimentation in different subjects. So, for example, Benoît Lahaye, which is for me one of the best growers in Champagne, because Benoît controls everything and he is very passionate by his job, and he works now with his son. So it's a very good vision of the growing system. So I always be admirative by the work of Benoît Lahaye in his vineyard. But for example, other growers like Aurélien Laert or Aurélien Suenen, Benoît Tarlan. So different names as each one. So first, they are very friendly. Yes. And secondly, they make a lot of work in the vineyard and they exchange a lot. Yeah. And for me, our job is a very passionate work. Mm-hmm. And it's a work when we produce wine and we produce pleasure. And I think I can't make this job with individual vision. For me, the wine is the exchange. So you need to drink wine with many people. I think it's not interesting to drink wine alone. And for me, about the production, it's the same thing. I can't make my job alone and no exchange with other people. It's not my vision.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. It's that balance between having the academic exchange, the academic approach, but also it is for pleasure. So you need to understand what makes people happy when they drink your wines or what they don't like about drinking your wines, because ultimately, it's the joy of life.
Yes.
Yeah.
I make wine for drinking, not only for tasting.
Yeah. Nicely put. It's so true.
Yeah.
We get a little bit too bogged down in the technical elements sometimes. So yeah, that's fantastic. And look, Fabrice, I just want to say thank you very much for your time today. It's been really great to, know you for the last few years and to come and see you from time to time and understand where you are with your journey and to keep on tasting your amazing champagnes, because, they're some of the most exciting champagnes for me. So I want to thank you for what you do and what you do for all of us, and just keep up the amazing work.
Thank you so much for your visit.
Pleasure. Vine & Bubble is a boutique and independent information source dedicated exclusively to telling the real story of champagne. It was launched by me, Sarah Underdown, in November 2018, after almost a decade of working in the champagne industry as a recognised writer, educator and presenter. Vine & Bubble brings together a network of Australian wine journalists, sommeliers, educators and industry representatives as regular contributors. As a team of champagne lovers and communicators, we are thrilled to share our united passion with wine-loving audiences. To read more about champagne, to subscribe to events in Australia and learn more about opportunities to join us for experiences in champagne, visit vineandbubble.com and register your details.